Aloha students. I'm United States Congressman Ed Case, and behind me is the United States Congress on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and I'm coming to you from your Congress today. I represent Hawaii's 1st Congressional District, which covers almost all of Oahu, all the way from Makapu'u Point in Hawaii Kai over on the east side, all the way through downtown Honolulu, up to Mililani, and down through Waipahu to Ewa Beach, Kapolei, all the way out to Ko'olina. 730,000 people live in my district, and the other 730,000 people live in Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District, which is the rest of the state. And I, together with my colleague in the 2nd Congressional District, Congressman Kaiali'i Kahele, we represent you in the United States House of Representatives. So let's start with the basics. And the basics are set by the most important document in our entire history. Our Declaration of Independence, of course, was a critical document where we said to Great Britain and to the world that we were our own country and we would govern ourselves. But the document I'm referring to now is our United States Constitution, which we passed and ratified in 1789, all of those years ago. And we have lived under that Constitution ever since. And that Constitution sets the ground rules for how we're going to govern ourselves. And so let's talk a little bit about what our Constitution says in terms of our federal government, which is the government that governs all of our country. And we're all subject to our federal government. Now we have a state government in Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, and the state of Hawaii is responsible for taking care of the state. And we also have county governments, so the city and county of Honolulu. But the city and county of Honolulu and the state governments are all subject to our national government and our national laws. And the Constitution says how we set that up. So what does the Constitution say? Well, it says that our government is made up of 3 separate, independent, and co-equal branches of government. And why did we do it that way? Well, we wanted them to be separate, so each of them had a responsibility. We wanted them to be independent so that none of those could tell the other one what to do. And we wanted them to be co-equal, which means that each of those branches of government has an equal role in the running of our government. We also wanted to set up something called a system of checks and balances. And you've heard that, and you'll hear that a lot more throughout your lives. Checks and balances. And what does that really mean? It means that each of our branches of government is responsible for taking a watch and look and an oversight at the other branches of government so that they don't get out of control. Because when we set our country up, we were concerned about a centralization of power in one person, one dictator, in our case, one king, who dictated exactly what was going to happen in our country for better or worse. And so we wanted to say, look, we have to set up a government that works, but we want each of the parts of our government to be watching over the others. Now, what are those 3 branches of government? Well, they are the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. So, of course, since I'm in the United States Congress, I think that my branch is the most important, the legislative branch. And our job is to legislate. Our job is to make the laws by which we are all going to live. And we have very specific duties in terms of making the laws, but that's basically what our job is. The heads of the legislative branch are people like me, the elected members of Congress, because the legislative branch is Congress. And so as a member of Congress, I am responsible to discharge the duties of the legislative branch. Now the executive branch is charged with implementing and administering our laws and also making other efforts on behalf of our country, especially in the area of our armed services and our foreign relations, our relations with other countries. And the executive branch is run by the President of the United States. And then the judicial branch is our courts. And in this context, the judicial branch is responsible for making sure that both of us, the executive branch and the legislative branch, are doing our jobs. The judicial branch is headed by the United States Supreme Court. And they are the ones to which we take ultimately all of our disputes, and they're responsible for saying what the Constitution means and for making sure that we're doing our job and making sure that the citizens of our country are heard with grievances. Well, that's a tough question, because I've had a lot of great teachers in my life, and not all of them in school, by the way. I had one of my best teachers ever was the first person I really worked for full-time, who was a United States Congressman from Hawaii. His name was Spark Matsunaga, and I went to work for him when I was 22 years old, right here in the U.S. Congress. In fact, his office was literally 100 feet from where I'm taping this. And so he was a great teacher, and he influenced my life. But my education, my formal education was a great one. I was born and raised in Hilo, and I went through the public school system in Hilo until the end of 6th grade, and then I went to Hawaii Preparatory Academy, private school in Waimea on Hawaii Island, all the way through high school. And then I went to college and law school on the mainland. And all the way through, I had incredible teachers. But I remember two in particular. The first was a woman named Nora Nabeta, who was my teacher in Waiakeakai Elementary School in Hilo. And I was pretty young at the time. I was maybe 3rd grade or something like that. But I think what Ms. Nabeta taught me was to be curious about life. She always was one to ask why, or make you ask why. She always exposed me to many different things. She challenged me. And I think that that's an important lesson, because you don't learn by just being kind of passive about things and just letting it flow to you. You learn by thinking about things. You learn by being challenged. You learn by facing situations that you may not make sense to you in the beginning, but they make sense to you if you work at it. And you learn by teachers that guide you through that process. And she did a darn good job of that, so I remember her. The second one I remember is a guy named Paul Noff. He was my teacher in 10th and 11th grade at HPA, which is Hawaii Preparatory Academy. And he was my English teacher. And I learned a lot about life just the way he taught about books and reading. So we would study books that you are studying today. But we wouldn't just read the books. We would talk about what the books meant, and what was going on in that person's life. What were the challenges that person was facing, and how did that person reconcile? And that was enough learning. But I'll tell you one thing about Mr. Noff. It was a troubled time in my life where I was trying to find my way. And I was not a very good student for Mr. Noff. I probably gave him a lot of trouble. In fact, I know I gave him a lot of trouble, and today I regret that. But you know what he did? He understood somehow. And one day he said, "Hey, Ed, let's go for a walk." And he said, "Hey, what's happening?" And see, I'm choking up because he did make that difference. But it was a time when I was struggling for answers myself, and I felt that he really cared. And he thought that I had potential, both inside and outside the classroom, although I don't think I got an A from him. Got a few A's later on, but he helped me on my path. So, as you sit there, hopefully listening to what I'm kind of trying to explain to you about our government, about our country, about your obligations, your responsibilities, your opportunities in our country. I also hope you will take a moment to think about the people that taught you, including your current teachers, and realize that they care, that they're trying to prepare you for life, and that your opportunities in this country are what you make of them, but we all need you to be a part of our country. So thank you so much for listening, and aloha from Capitol Hill.